Armin was not born with wealth. His life began in a small neighborhood where people worked hard just to survive. His father drove a rickshaw, and his mother stitched clothes for neighbors to earn extra income. As a boy, Armin used to study under a streetlight when electricity failed at home. He had no fancy books, no private tutors, only his determination and his dreams. Years later, all his sacrifices paid off. He became the head of his own company, slowly building it from a tiny office with one old table into a growing business with many employees. People now called him a CEO, but in his heart, he was still the same boy who once promised his parents he would change their lives. One warm morning, Armin walked into the city's largest bank. He looked tired but strong. His company had just won a big contract, and he wanted to withdraw a large amount of money to pay salaries and bonuses. For him, his workers were family. He always believed that their happiness kept the company alive. The bank was filled with people, some in business suits, some in simple clothes, some waiting impatiently. Armin filled out the withdrawal slip carefully and walked toward the counter. He greeted the cashier politely and placed the slip on the desk. The woman at the counter looked at the paper, then at Armin. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and her expression turned stiff. She typed something into her computer, frowned, and shook her head. "I'm sorry, sir," she said in a flat tone. "Your withdrawal cannot be processed." Armin blinked in confusion. "What do you mean? There must be some mistake. This is my account, and the balance is enough." The cashier's voice grew sharper. "Your account has been frozen. You cannot access these funds." A wave of shock spread through Armin's chest. He leaned forward slightly. "Frozen? Why? I have never faced such a problem before. Please check again." But the woman's face remained cold. "I cannot do anything more. If you want details, you'll need to speak with the manager." Behind him, people waiting in line began to whisper. Some looked at him with curiosity, others with judgment. A few even smiled in amusement, as if they enjoyed watching a man in a business suit face rejection. For Armin, the whispers felt like sharp needles. He had spent years building his dignity, and now it was being questioned in public. Trying to remain calm, he asked the cashier, "Please direct me to the manager." Minutes later, he was sitting in a glass office at the back of the bank. The manager, a serious-looking man with gray hair and a heavy voice, didn't offer him tea, didn't even smile. Instead, he folded his hands and said firmly, "Mr. Armin, I'm afraid we cannot allow you to withdraw money today. There are certain irregularities in your account." Armin's heart beat faster. "Irregularities? What are you talking about? I've maintained this account for years. My company's money is safe here. I need this withdrawal today, not tomorrow." The manager avoided his eyes. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "We are investigating the matter. Until the investigation is over, your account remains blocked." Armin clenched his fists under the desk. He wanted to raise his voice, but he stopped himself. He thought of his employees waiting for their salaries. He thought of their families who depended on him. If he failed to pay them, their trust in him would break. He leaned forward. "Listen, I cannot wait for your investigation. Hundreds of people depend on me. I need to pay them today. You cannot stop me from accessing my own money." The manager looked at him, his tone growing colder. "I'm sorry, Mr. Armin, but our rules are clear. You will have to wait." At that moment, frustration and helplessness mixed inside Armin. For the first time in years, he felt powerless. Suddenly, the glass door opened. The sound of footsteps echoed softly across the office. A young woman entered, her presence calm yet commanding. She wore a navy blue dress, her dark hair tied neatly at the back. She carried no heavy jewelry, no show of wealth, but her confidence filled the room like sunlight. The manager immediately stood up, his voice changing completely. "Ma'am, I didn't expect you today." Armin turned to look at her, surprised by the sudden respect in the manager's tone. Who was she? The woman's eyes moved from the manager to Armin. She studied him for a moment, then asked in a steady voice, "What's happening here?" The manager cleared his throat nervously. "This gentleman is trying to make a large withdrawal. But there are issues with his account. I was just explaining to him before he could finish." The woman raised her hand slightly, her voice cutting sharp and clear. "Enough. Stop embarrassing yourself." The manager froze. Silence filled the air. The woman stepped closer, her eyes steady. "This bank belongs to me. I want to know why you are denying a client without proper reason." Her words struck like thunder. Armin's eyes widened. He felt as if the ground had shifted beneath him. The very bank that humiliated him belonged to her. And in that single moment, everything changed. For a few seconds, silence held the room like a heavy chain. Armin sat frozen in his chair, unable to believe what he had just heard. The woman standing before him, dressed simply but with unmatched authority, had claimed ownership of the bank. The manager's face lost all its color. His proud and stiff posture collapsed into nervousness. He adjusted his tie and lowered his eyes like a schoolboy caught in a mistake. "Ma'am, I was only following the rules," the manager stammered. The woman gave him a sharp look. "Rules are important, but misusing them to humiliate people is not acceptable." Her voice was calm, yet every word carried weight. Armin felt a strange mixture of relief and curiosity. Who was this woman? How could someone so young and modest own an entire bank? He had seen wealthy people before, those who flaunted their power with flashy clothes and loud words. But she was different. Her power didn't need decoration, it spoke for itself. The woman turned to Armin. Her expression softened. "I apologize for what happened here. May I know your name?" "Armin," he replied, still trying to steady his voice. "I run a small company. My employees are waiting for their salaries, and I needed to withdraw funds." "But the manager," the woman raised her hand gently, stopping him. "I understand. Don't worry. You will get what you came for." She glanced at the manager. "Process his withdrawal immediately." The manager bowed slightly and hurried out of the room, his footsteps quick as though he wanted to escape. For the first time since entering the bank, Armin felt air return to his lungs. He looked at the woman again. There was something mysterious about her presence. She didn't look much older than him, yet she carried herself with the calm dignity of someone who had faced storms and learned to master them. "I don't know how to thank you," Armin said quietly. "You don't need to," she replied. "People like you deserve respect, not humiliation." Her words touched him deeply. Respect. It was a small word, but it meant more to him than wealth or luxury. He had spent years proving himself to the world, and yet today, one unfair denial had shaken everything. Now, a stranger's kindness restored his strength. Armin wanted to ask more about her name, her story, how she came to own such a powerful institution. But before he could, the manager returned with papers, trembling slightly as he placed them on the desk. "Everything is ready, ma'am," he said, his tone submissive. The woman nodded and looked at Armin. "Please, complete your withdrawal." Armin signed the papers and received the cash. It felt heavy in his hands, not because of its weight, but because of the struggle he had gone through to get it. He turned to the woman once again. "Thank you. Truly. Without this money, many families would have suffered today." The woman gave a faint smile. "Then use it well. Money is valuable only when it helps people." Her words stayed in his mind as he walked out of the office. The whispers from the bank floor were still there, but they no longer bothered him. He held his head high, carrying not just money but also a story that would remain with him forever. As Armin stepped outside into the sunlight, he thought about her again. Who was she? What was her journey? How could someone so young carry so much authority? That night, after distributing salaries and bonuses, Armin sat in his office long after everyone had gone home. The room was silent except for the ticking of the clock. But his mind was restless. He kept seeing her face, the calm eyes, the confident voice, the way she said, "This bank belongs to me." For the first time in years, curiosity distracted him from work. He wanted to know her name, her story, everything. The next morning, Armin returned to the bank, not for money this time, but for answers. When he entered, the staff looked at him differently. Yesterday, some had mocked him. Today, their eyes carried respect. Perhaps they had seen how the owner herself had stood by him. He asked politely at the counter, "May I meet the owner of this bank?" The staff exchanged nervous glances. Finally, one of them said, "She doesn't meet clients often." "But you, please wait, sir." Minutes later, Armin was led to a private office on the top floor. The door opened, and there she was again. She sat by the window, sunlight falling gently across her face. Her navy blue dress had been replaced by a simple white one, yet her elegance remained the same. She looked up and smiled faintly. "You came back," she said. Armin nodded. "Yes. I couldn't stop thinking. Yesterday you helped me without asking for anything. I want to know why. And, who are you really?" The woman studied him for a moment, her eyes thoughtful. Then she spoke in a calm, steady tone. "My name is Meher. And the story of how I own this bank is not simple." Armin leaned forward, his heart racing. A new chapter was opening, and he could sense it would change everything again. Armin sat across from Meher, still unsure whether to feel nervous or curious. Her presence had a calmness that filled the entire office. The room was large but not decorated with heavy furniture. It reflected her personality, simple, yet powerful. She folded her hands on the desk and looked out the wide glass window for a moment before speaking. "People only see what I own today. They don't see what I lost yesterday." Armin listened carefully. He knew there was a deep story hidden behind her confident eyes. Meher continued softly, "I was not born into wealth. My father was a schoolteacher in a small town. He lived honestly, never cheated anyone, never hurt anyone. But honesty doesn't always bring comfort. We lived with little, sometimes without even proper food on the table." She paused, her voice steady but filled with memory. "My mother used to sell handmade scarves in the market. She always told me, 'Meher, never bow your head to anyone who tries to make you feel small.' I didn't understand her fully back then. But life taught me the meaning soon enough." Armin leaned forward, his heart heavy as he listened. He could see his own childhood struggles reflected in hers. "One winter," Meher went on, "my father became sick. We needed money for his treatment, but we didn't have enough. My mother and I went to the local bank. We begged them for a small loan, just enough to save him. But the manager looked at us like we were nothing. He refused us coldly, as if our lives had no value." Her eyes darkened at the memory, though her voice remained calm. "We walked out of that bank with tears in our eyes. That night, my father's condition worsened. We lost him within days." Armin felt his throat tighten. He imagined the pain of losing someone you loved just because no one cared to help. Meher took a slow breath. "That night, I made a promise to myself. One day, I will stand so strong that no manager, no banker, no powerful man will ever look down on me or my family again." Her words carried quiet fire. Armin whispered, "And you did it? You own this place now?" Meher gave a small, bittersweet smile. "Yes. But the journey was not easy. After my father passed, I worked day and night. I studied during the day, and at night I worked at a small shop. My mother kept stitching scarves, even when her hands were swollen with pain. Slowly, we gathered enough for me to attend university. She looked out the window again. I was the girl who walked everywhere because she couldn't afford a bus ticket. I was the girl who ate bread and water for days to save money for books. But I never stopped. I refused to quit. Armin could feel the weight of every word. He saw not just a successful woman before him but a fighter who carried scars no one could see. One day, Meher said with a faint smile, "I got a chance. A small investor noticed my hard work and trusted me. I started working in finance, learned the system from inside. Years later, I had enough knowledge, courage, and savings to build my own path. Slowly, I bought shares, invested wisely, and step by step, I became the owner of this very bank." Her voice grew firm. "Do you see, Armin? The same place that once rejected my father's life became the place I now control. Life has a strange way of turning pain into strength." Armin sat silently, his chest full of respect. He had faced struggles too, but her story showed him a different level of endurance. She had not just survived, she had risen above everything. Meher leaned back in her chair. "That is why I cannot bear to see people humiliated inside this bank. Money is not just numbers on a screen. For some, it is survival, dignity, hope." Her words reminded Armin of yesterday, when the manager had refused him. He realized now that her anger wasn't only for him, but also for the memory of her father, for every person who was ever turned away unfairly. After a long pause, Armin spoke. "Meher, your story, it's inspiring. I can see why you stepped in yesterday. You know the pain of being powerless. That's why you protect others from it." Meher nodded gently. "Exactly. The world respects only strength. But true strength is not about crushing others, it is about lifting them when no one else will." Armin felt something shift inside him. He had come for money, then for answers. Now he was leaving with something greater, a lesson. He looked at Meher with quiet admiration. "Thank you for sharing this with me," he said. "I thought I came here to solve a problem. But instead, I found inspiration." Meher gave him a calm smile. "Perhaps that is why our paths crossed. Sometimes life brings people together for reasons we don't understand immediately." Armin stood to leave, but his heart was restless. He knew this was not the end. Meeting Meher had opened a door inside him, a door to new questions, new possibilities. As he stepped out of her office, her words echoed in his mind, "True strength is about lifting others." For the first time in days, he felt a new purpose growing within him. And deep down, he knew this was only the beginning of something larger than either of them could imagine. The following days felt different for Armin. He had gone to the bank only to withdraw money, but he had walked out with something much more: respect for a woman whose story was stronger than any wealth. At his office, work continued as usual. Employees came and went, files piled up on his desk, and meetings filled his hours. Yet, even in the middle of busy schedules, Armin's thoughts often drifted toward Meher. He wondered how someone who had faced such pain could still stand so gracefully, without bitterness in her heart. One evening, after everyone had left, Armin stood by the window of his office, watching the city lights flicker. He thought about her words, "True strength is about lifting others." He realized he wanted to know her more, not just her story, but the way she saw life, the way she built strength from suffering. The next morning, Armin visited the bank again. This time, he wasn't there for money. He asked the receptionist politely, "Can I meet Miss Meher? I only need a few minutes." The receptionist looked surprised. "She doesn't meet clients without appointments, sir." Armin nodded. "Please tell her it's Armin." If she's busy, I'll wait. To his surprise, after a short while, a staff member came to guide him upstairs. When the door to her office opened, Meher looked up with a questioning smile. "You again," she said gently. "I hope the bank hasn't troubled you this time." Armin smiled lightly. "No, no trouble. I, actually came to thank you again. And also, if you don't mind, I wanted to talk." Meher raised her brows. "Talk? About what?" Armin hesitated for a moment. "About life. About struggles. About how you manage to rise when so many others give up." Meher leaned back in her chair, studying him. "That's not a usual request. Most people come here only to discuss money, not life." "I know," Armin admitted. "But your words the other day stayed with me. I feel like there's so much I can learn from you." For a moment, silence hung in the air. Then, slowly, Meher's expression softened. "Very well. Sit." That day, their conversation stretched for hours. Armin told her about his childhood, how his father drove a rickshaw, how his mother sacrificed everything to make sure he could study. He spoke about the nights he worked in small shops to save for his education, and the endless struggle of building his company from nothing. Meher listened carefully, her eyes calm but thoughtful. "So, you and I are not so different," she said at last. "We both know what it means to start from the bottom." Armin nodded. "Yes. Maybe that's why your story touched me so much. It feels familiar." For the first time since they met, Meher laughed softly. It was not loud or playful, but gentle, like a breeze. "You know, Armin, people usually see me as the owner of a bank. They forget that behind this title, there was once a girl who walked barefoot to school." Her words carried truth and humility. Armin felt the gap between them shrink. Days passed, and their meetings became more frequent. Sometimes Armin visited her office, sometimes they spoke over tea in the bank's quiet lounge. Their conversations were never about wealth or business, they were about values, choices, and life lessons. One afternoon, when the rain fell softly against the windows, Meher shared something she had never told anyone else. "There was a time when I thought of giving up," she confessed. "After my father died, my mother grew weaker. I was young, tired, and the world seemed too heavy. I wondered, what's the point of fighting if everything keeps slipping away?" Armin listened closely, his heart tightening. "What stopped you from giving up?" Meher's eyes glistened slightly, though her voice remained steady. "My mother's words. She once held my hand and said, 'Meher, you were born to rise higher than me. If you fall now, then everything I endured will be wasted.' That kept me alive. Every time I felt weak, I heard her voice." Armin looked at her with admiration. "Your mother must have been a strong woman." "She was," Meher said softly. "She gave me the courage to dream." At that moment, Armin realized something. Meher wasn't just a bank owner, she was a living reminder that strength was not about money but about the heart that refused to break. The bond between them grew quietly, built not on wealth or status but on shared scars of struggle. Armin felt lighter every time he spoke to her. And Meher, who had always kept herself distant from people, began to notice a comfort she hadn't felt in years. One evening, as Armin prepared to leave her office, Meher stopped him. "Armin," she said, her tone serious, "do you know why I let you in again and again?" Armin turned, curious. "Because you remind me of myself," she continued. "I see the same fire in your eyes, the fire that refuses to die, no matter how many storms come." Her words struck him deeply. He bowed his head slightly in respect. "That means more to me than anything else." As he walked out of the bank that night, the city lights seemed brighter. Something new had begun between them, not friendship, not business, but a bond born from shared pain and silent respect. Neither of them knew where it would lead, but both felt that destiny had tied their paths for a reason. Life rarely moved in a straight line for Armin. Just when he felt a new sense of peace after meeting Meher, an unexpected storm came knocking at his door. It began on a Monday morning. Armin walked into his office, ready to begin the week, when his assistant rushed toward him with panic on his face. "Sir," the assistant said breathlessly, "there's trouble. A competitor has filed a complaint against our company. They're accusing us of breaking contract terms." Armin frowned. "That's impossible. We followed every rule." "Yes, sir, but they've gone public. News channels are already talking. Clients are calling to ask if it's true." For a moment, Armin felt the same heaviness he had felt at the bank weeks ago, the weight of helplessness. But then he steadied himself. "Don't panic. Gather the team. We'll face this." Yet, as the day went on, things only got worse. Some clients froze their projects, others delayed payments, and whispers began spreading that Armin's company might collapse. That evening, he sat in his office long after everyone left. His desk was covered with files, yet his eyes were fixed on the city outside. A voice inside him whispered, "What if you lose everything? What if your employees leave? What if your dreams end here?" He was lost in thought when his phone buzzed. It was a message from Meher. "I heard about the news. Are you okay?" For some reason, those simple words felt like a hand reaching into his storm. He replied honestly, "Not okay. But I'm trying to stay strong." Minutes later, Meher called. Her voice was calm, as always. "Armin, meet me tomorrow morning. Come to the bank. We'll talk." The next day, Armin walked into her office, his face tired but his eyes still holding determination. Meher looked at him closely. "You haven't slept." He smiled weakly. "How could I? Everything I built feels like it's falling apart." "Do you believe you did wrong?" she asked. "No," he answered firmly. "Every contract was followed. I know my work is clean." Meher leaned forward. "Then why do you look defeated? Do you remember what I told you? The world respects only strength. If you let their lies break you, they win." Armin sighed. "But Meher, I'm not fighting alone. I have hundreds of employees depending on me. If I fail, they suffer." Meher's eyes softened. "That's exactly why you cannot fail. You are not just fighting for yourself, you are fighting for them." Her words gave him strength. She continued, "Listen, Armin. When I first started in finance, powerful people tried to destroy me too. They spread rumors, blocked my chances, laughed at me. But I didn't bend. I learned something important: when storms come, don't hide. Walk right through them. The world will respect you for it." Armin nodded slowly. "You make it sound simple." "It's not simple," Meher said firmly. "But it's necessary." The conversation lit a fire inside him. That evening, Armin gathered his team. He explained the situation clearly, showed proof of their honesty, and reminded them why they had built the company in the first place. "We are not thieves," he told them with strength in his voice. "We are builders. If we give up now, then the lies win. But if we stand together, the truth will shine." His employees, who had been afraid all day, now looked at him with renewed courage. The fight was not easy. The competitors spread more rumors, clients hesitated, and every day brought new challenges. But Armin refused to hide. He held press conferences, presented documents, and faced every question with calm dignity. Slowly, the truth began to emerge: his company was innocent, and the competitor's complaint was nothing more than jealousy. Weeks later, the news channels corrected their stories. Clients returned, even more loyal than before. Armin's company didn't just survive, it became stronger. One evening, After the storm had finally passed, Armin visited Meher again. He walked into her office with a quiet smile. "You were right," he said. "If I had hidden, I would have lost. But because I stood firm, we won." Meher smiled back, her eyes full of pride. "I knew you would. That fire in you, it's too strong to be put out by lies." Armin looked at her with deep respect. "Meher, I don't know what destiny is doing, but every time I fall, you appear like a guide." She shook her head gently. "No, Armin. You already had the strength inside you. I only reminded you of it." Their eyes met, and for a moment, silence said more than words. Something unspoken was building between them, not just respect, not just friendship, but a bond carved by shared storms. Outside the window, the city lights glowed brighter than ever. For Armin, the night no longer felt heavy. Because he knew he wasn't walking this path alone anymore. After the storm of false accusations passed, life slowly returned to normal for Armin. His company was safe again, his employees trusted him more than ever, and his reputation had grown stronger. Yet, in his heart, something new was happening. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Meher's calm face and heard her steady words, "True strength is about lifting others." She had not only guided him but had also walked beside him through the darkest days. For Meher, too, life felt slightly different. She was used to keeping people at a distance. As the owner of a bank, she dealt with hundreds of clients, managers, and businessmen, but all her interactions remained professional and formal. With Armin, however, there was something else. His honesty, his struggles, his fire reminded her of her own journey. For the first time in years, she felt a comfort she had never allowed herself to feel. One afternoon, Armin invited Meher to his office. He wanted her to see the place he had built with his own hands. When she entered, the staff stared with curiosity and respect. Everyone in the company knew her story now, how she had once stepped in at the bank and stood by their leader. To them, she was more than a bank owner, she was a symbol of dignity. Armin welcomed her warmly. "This is where it all began," he said, leading her through the modest but lively office. "Just one small desk, one old chair, and me. That was my beginning." Meher touched the wooden desk that stood in a corner. "You've come far. But I can see you didn't forget where you started." "I can't," Armin replied softly. "If I forget my roots, I lose myself." They walked through the office, greeted by smiling employees. Meher noticed how each person looked at Armin not with fear, but with respect and affection. It was rare to see a leader loved this much. Later, Armin guided her to his private office. It was simple, with a large window overlooking the city. On the wall hung a framed picture of his parents. Meher paused in front of it. "Your parents?" "Yes," Armin said, his voice gentle. "They gave me everything even when they had nothing. My father used to tell me, 'Armin, your hands may be small now, but one day they'll carry big responsibilities.' I live by those words." Meher's eyes softened. She whispered, "Your father's words remind me of my mother. She also believed in me when no one else did." For a long moment, both of them stood silently, connected not by wealth or success but by memories of parents who had shaped their paths. Days turned into weeks, and their bond grew stronger. They didn't meet as bank owner and businessman anymore, they met as two souls who understood each other's wounds. Sometimes they spoke about business, but mostly they shared thoughts about life, struggles, and the meaning of true success. One evening, when the sun was setting, they sat together in Meher's office. The golden light touched the glass walls, painting the room in soft colors. Armin asked quietly, "Meher, do you ever feel lonely, even after achieving so much?" Meher didn't answer immediately. She looked at the fading sun, her expression thoughtful. "Yes," she admitted at last. "People see my success, but they don't see the silence behind it. I built walls around myself because I was afraid of losing again, afraid of trusting. Loneliness became my shield. Armin's voice was gentle. You don't have to carry everything alone. Even the strongest need someone who understands. She turned to him, surprised by his words. For years, no one had spoken to her like that, not as an owner, not as a figure of power, but as a human being. Do you feel the same? She asked. Armin nodded. Yes. Success gives respect, but it doesn't give peace. Sometimes, after all the meetings are done and the office is quiet, I feel an emptiness. But since I met you, that emptiness feels lighter. Meher's eyes lingered on him, and for the first time, she allowed herself to smile openly. It wasn't the polite smile she gave to clients or managers. It was real, almost fragile, yet filled with warmth. In that quiet moment, neither of them needed to speak more. The silence between them said everything, a silent understanding that they were no longer alone in their journeys. As weeks passed, their meetings became part of their lives. Armin found himself waiting for the moments he could talk to Meher, and she found herself looking forward to the calmness his presence brought. But life, as always, had its own plans. One morning, Meher received troubling news. A major investor in her bank was planning to pull out, spreading doubts about her leadership. It reminded her of the old days, of people trying to break her strength. That evening, she sat in her office, her mind clouded with worries. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of fear. Then, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Armin. I heard something is troubling you. Do you want to talk? Meher stared at the message for a long moment. Slowly, her lips curved into a faint smile. For the first time, she realized she didn't have to fight alone anymore. The following week brought an unexpected challenge for Meher. A major investor in her bank was threatening to withdraw all funding, claiming doubts about the bank's stability. The news spread quietly among employees, creating tension. Even the staff, usually confident under her leadership, whispered in worry. Meher sat alone in her office, staring at the reports. She had faced challenges before, but this felt different. It wasn't about money alone, it was about trust, her hard-earned reputation, and the responsibility she had carried for years. Her hands clenched around the papers as a deep worry filled her heart. At that moment, her phone rang. It was Armin. Meher, I heard about the investor, he said softly. Are you okay? She hesitated. Usually, she would handle problems alone, without letting anyone see her doubts. But something about Armin's calm, steady voice gave her a strange comfort. I don't know, she admitted quietly. I've faced storms before, but this one feels bigger. You don't have to face it alone, Armin replied firmly. Let me help. Let me stand with you, like you stood with me. Those words struck her. For years, she had carried her burdens alone. She had trusted very few people. Yet, here was someone she respected deeply offering to share the weight. The next morning, Armin arrived at her office early. Together, they reviewed every report, every contract, and every detail of the investor's concerns. They stayed late into the evening, working calmly but with determination. Most people would panic, Meher said softly, breaking the quiet. But you make me feel stronger. Armin looked at her and smiled. You've always been strong, Meher. I'm just reminding you of it. As days passed, their teamwork produced results. They presented clear reports, evidence of the bank's stability, and a plan for growth. Meher called the investor personally, speaking with confidence and honesty. Armin supported her during the call, standing quietly nearby as she answered every question with clarity. By the end of the week, the investor agreed to continue funding. The tension in the bank eased, and employees felt a renewed sense of trust and security. The victory was not just financial, it was emotional. Meher realized she had faced the storm without fear, but this time, she had not been alone. That evening, she invited Armin to sit with her by the window of her office. The city lights reflected in the glass, a quiet reminder of how far they had both come. "You know," she began softly, "I used to think strength meant standing alone. But now, I see it can also mean trusting someone to stand beside you." Armin looked at her, understanding the depth of her words. "Yes. Life has taught us both that no matter how strong we are, having someone who understands makes all the difference." For a long time, they sat in silence, letting the calm settle around them. The air was filled with a quiet respect, a bond built on shared struggles, victories, and understanding. Then Meher turned toward him. "Armin, there's something else I want to say. You've inspired me too, reminded me that even when life feels heavy, hope and trust can guide you through. You're more than just a businessman, you're someone who truly cares for people." Armin felt a warmth spread in his chest. "And you've inspired me, Meher. You've shown me that true power is not in money or position, but in integrity, courage, and the strength to lift others." Their eyes met, and for the first time, words were not necessary. They had both shared their deepest fears, hopes, and lessons. The connection between them was no longer about mentorship or guidance, it was about mutual respect and understanding, a silent promise that they would face life's challenges together. As the night deepened, Armin stood to leave. Meher followed him to the door. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Not just for helping me with the investor, but for being someone I can trust." Armin smiled. "And thank you, Meher, for reminding me what true strength means." They paused at the doorway, the city lights twinkling behind them. Then, as if the moment needed no more words, they shared a simple handshake, warm, firm, and meaningful. It was a gesture that spoke of trust, courage, and the beginning of something lasting. As Armin stepped outside, he looked back once. Meher was standing by her window, watching him leave, a faint smile on her face. He knew, deep in his heart, that this was more than just a business connection or a friendship, it was a bond built from struggle, respect, and shared dreams. And in that bond, both of them found strength they had never known before. Together, they were ready for whatever challenges life might bring next. The city lights shone brightly around them, reflecting the promise of new beginnings, resilience, and hope. Because in a world full of uncertainty, they had discovered something unshakable, a silent, unspoken trust, and the courage to face every storm, together.